Hello and welcome to the final spoiler episode for the question arcs of Umineko. This is going to cover my final, quite large video from episode 4 that basically tore through the Tea Party and the question mark Tea Party. This is going to contain spoilers for the entirety of Umineko, and let me tell you, there's still plenty to spoil if you've not played the back half at all. So don't keep watching if you don't already know where the rest of the game goes. Despite the length of the video, I think there's quite a lot of this that I'm going to skim over because there's quite a bit of the mechanical whodunit stuff, and based on the response to my last video, I pretty much got the concept of the whodunit for this episode, and I actually have thematic thoughts about that I will get to at the end after going through specific beats from this section, as well as just some overall thoughts about the question arcs structurally, what they are, and then what we're about to move on to for the rest of Umineko. In general, Peace Battler's exploration of the island and the mystery and trying to piece things together and not quite finding a way to make things fit together is interesting to me because of the way in which he never, in the question arcs, never comes to a position where he's willing to fully embrace the idea that people are lying. The moment where he's trying to puzzle out Jessica's call to him, he's like, why would she have said these things? He just fundamentally believes what she says. Even though, with very non-nefarious means, you could simply think Jessica was playing a prank. And I don't think it's that simple. I think there is a degree of coercion with money, or more likely her parents insisting she make this call because they want money. But there's a pretty straightforward way in which she is compelled to tell this story. She doesn't have to believe in anything she's saying. And it's very funny how Battler is willing to believe every bit of illusion and fabrication throughout this whole thing, contrasted against his insistence on denying the possibility of witches and denying Beatrice her identity throughout. He will flip in the answer arcs, and I think there's going to be some more to say as he actually gets to the realization where he is willing to do this. But he understands the value of illusions, the golden truth. He will come to a more nuanced understanding of these things when he loses the blocker that prevents him even conceptualizing that people would just lie to him, which he genuinely just doesn't even cop to when puzzling over how the hell something could happen. Again, without even thinking that it's entirely a ruse, he doesn't even question the validity of what Jessica says. He's like, how could Jessica predict the nature of the final blow? It's impossible. Just at no point thinking, if something is impossible, then the basic premises need to be questioned. He just never questions He just never questions the premises. He just takes them and adopts them and goes, well, they're definitely true, so I must work from these building blocks. And I do think the fact that people are speaking with a golden truth does a lot to convince him in this section. This parallels in a lot of ways to episode 1, where Battler has some criticisms about the family, the structure of it, how the hierarchy exists, and has some criticisms of his parents and their parents in general, in a way that George does not. George actually defends their parents and says, well, you have to be a shitty rich person. It's just how it is being a grown-up. But Battler has these doubts, but I guess the best illustration of this is Battler does not think that it's okay for Rosa to hit Maria. He himself does not believe that to be okay. But the golden truth overwrites him as everyone around him says, this is a mother's right, this is her business, this is not something we should intervene in. And Battler folds and accepts that golden truth. And that is what this episode is too. Beatrice, again, highlighting the hypocrisy and irrationality of these shared delusions that people have about societal structures, says, sure, I'll get everyone to just tell you magic exists. To underscore the fact that Battler won't believe something that ridiculous, that on its face is harmless, because the magic itself is not, strictly speaking, what's leading to any of the murders that are happening here, and frankly, if Battler accepted Beatrice, depending on the exact timeline of events, maybe nobody or less people would have been murdered. But he is perfectly willing to accept the golden truth that leads to child abuse because it fits so naturally within the structure of society that we live in. It does feel like it adheres to the existing power structures of society, that a parent has agency over their child but not vice versa, that it makes sense. Like I said before, a lot of the sensible and logical ideas people espouse that feel very scientific and rooted in genetics and so forth are still magical thinking that don't have any logical or fact-based or factual basis in things. But I still accept it as, yes, these are reasonable and sensible things, while magic is rejected when there's honestly very little difference in those things and is merely commonly accepted things. A lot of the tragedy of this episode, pretty evidently, is Beatrice running out of patience despite being an endless witch and giving up on Battler. Even though he has made some progress here, he has made some realizations and has developed his understanding of things. He's able to get to the level of reasoning where he can understand Kinza's name being passed on to another person and that not invalidating the red truth. But again, it depends on your point of view. Has Battler's idea of reality changed, or has Battler's idea of how to tactically play this twisted game changed? Has he had any real change in understanding what the world is, or how people interact with and describe the world around them? And it honestly doesn't feel like he has. And in part, that's because he purely at this point sees Beatrice as an antagonist. They are not rivals. They have switched into a mode where he sees her as a villain, which I think gets muddy. Battler's relationship to Beatrice in some ways turns on a dime, and I struggle with it because it doesn't fully feel consistent. There are obviously multiple Battlers across different situations, but Meta Battler as a construct kind of has a gravity of constantly returning to, no matter what he says, wanting to support Beatrice. And in other ways, he will often present as if he is now going to become a competent force to be reckoned with, and will then turn around and make really stupid, foolish mistakes and give ground he absolutely should not have given in the first place. So it's not strictly speaking that it's not strictly speaking that only his relationship to Beatrice that feels like it flip-flops, but there's a difficult read to make on how he feels about her moment to moment. For instance, he becomes utterly shattered at the end of episode 2, and then at the start of episode 3 they have a tense relationship, and over episode 3 they build a rapport that she utterly shatters by revealing her trick, betraying any trust he might have built up in her. And then at the start of episode 4, they're somewhat cordial as enemies. And then the situation with Anji feels like it ruins any ability he has at that point to identify with her. He fully at that point thinks, you tortured my little sister, even though, not unbeknownst to him, Beatrice didn't really involve Anji to begin with. She didn't have much of an ability to do anything. And even the thing he says to her was like, you didn't say anything while this was happening to her, is really a kindness she did, because Battler would not have been able to save Anji, and Battler would not have enjoyed the sight if he had turned around. But even so, Anji ends up becoming a bigger wedge that fully drives them apart, because fundamentally Battler cares more about what's being done to other people than being done to him. And Beatrice does make use of it, is a big part of it. Beatrice never at any point says, I couldn't have done anything to save Anji. Instead, she invokes Anji's name in order to fuel Battler's fury, because Beatrice has gotten to the point of wanting to give up. She wants him to beat her. She, at this point, knows she cannot win. There is no victory condition for her that is actually achievable. She describes this as knowledge. She describes this as guaranteed, that there's no way for this to happen. The witches of certainty and miracles similarly also say there is no way that she wins. Now, we know that her real aim of getting Battler to understand will be achieved, and will tragically be achieved too late. But I'm looking forward to unpacking that properly at that point. But in this moment, it's very important for her motivation here of both further antagonizing Battler and then twice fake letting him beat her by not putting up a real defense, by not using the full tricks of her board and not taunting him. And crucially, her not taunting him means he's not getting to the real answer. Like I said, he's made some headway on understanding the rules of Beatrice's game, which theoretically allow him to understand her. In this moment, she thinks everything is too far gone for there actually to be understanding that comes out of this. Even though, if I am remembering right, literally in one episode he would understand. In one episode. But we'll talk about that with episode 5. The answer... This episode concludes the tragic Beatrice arc, and in some ways she is barely in episode 5 because of how she is catatonic, and then her piece will have some character assassination done to it. So, in a lot of ways, I view the answer arcs as concluding the origin stories, setting up who Beatrice is, giving you all of the information you need to know to theoretically answer those questions, and the answer arcs are going to be about addressing the way those questions are answered. Just to underscore some tragic moments, Beatrice talks about how she began with an unwavering desire to win with certainty, and I do think part of her despair here is realizing that both of the witches of certainty and miracles are actually against her because no one wants her to win. In the end, the reason she will achieve her real goal is because Battler does want her to win in a very twisty, turny way. But as far as the beings with real power that are even propping up this game, they both want her to not win. They just differ on whether they want her to tie perpetually or lose. And another moment of tragedy is really underscoring the realization Beatrice has that the thing that has tortured her about Battler and what he has done to her is not in his head at all. When she looks into his eyes, she doesn't see her reflection, she sees his little sister. Battler has other people he cares about, and even if his affection for Shannon was real, which I don't doubt that was real, it simply has not sustained his thoughts in the way it has sustained hers because he has had other stuff going on. But she transitions from this to saying, yes, that last game sure was fun. I was only tricking him a bit, but for just a short period of time, it felt like we understood each other. And that was fun. That's right. I should have made my move then. I should have continued for eternity with Battler still totally fooled. And this feels like, to me, the theoretical future that Canon or Shannon could have had with George or Jessica. The pseudo way out, where they adopt a specific personality, live that personality wholly, and try to have a married life with their partner that Beatrice could also theoretically have. Beatrice could take Battler and say, let us live together. But she only sees this as an option, or they only see this as an option if they continue to fool their partner. They can't tell their partner their whole life. They can't tell their partner about their other selves. They can't tell their partner about their history, their trauma. This is still a different version of escape than the endless possibilities. The ways in which Beatrice is tantalized by the endless game is because she doesn't have to commit. She only commits if Battler actually comes to really understand her, and understand her wholly and completely, rather than simply understanding half of a facade she has presented to him that is appealing enough that he identifies with it. And this is the dilemma. This is just the hedgehog's dilemma. Beatrice doesn't quite want to get close enough to reveal all of herself unless she is sure that Battler is accepting it. And she herself acknowledges here that she simply wouldn't have done that. She knows she wouldn't have been happy like that. And in some ways, it would be a far less bad version of what Kinzo did with Beatrice II, but it's not entirely different. It is having somebody who you ostensibly love, but has been trapped by your love for them and never gets to be their own person. So it is not acceptable. She has to push for something more, and her gambit, it didn't pay off. At least not yet. For the question arcs, I think Battler has not been his best self at many points, but we come back to the reason why I think Battler is the best person positioned to play this game for Beatrice, and why George and Jessica don't quite cut it for her. Battler, despite having said, I hate you, we are only enemies, I'm going to destroy you so I can just get back to my little sister, at one point says, I won't let you run away. Who are you? What is it you want? And Beatrice is like, oh, just do your stupid spinning the chessboard move. And I believe internally is trying to say, don't do it though. You don't want to understand me, right? Shouldn't you just forget about me as an illusion, a delusion, and move on? And at this point, Beatrice wants to give up and escape, but Battler's like, no. I need to know what this is. Because Battler fundamentally doesn't want to give up on this game, because Battler knows that there's something more here that he's not seeing. And this is maybe the most redeeming quality of Battler, that his stubbornness is being applied to good ends in this situation. Because this is what Beatrice needs. Beatrice needs someone who will not back down when she tries to rebuff them. As baffling as I find Battler's moment-to-moment reactions to Beatrice, the fact that he still deep down understands that there is a real person there, even as he denies there's a person there, that's what pulls him through this and keeps him going and fighting for whatever the secret truth is underneath. And obviously, when I say secret truth, I just mean Battler coming to the real understanding of who Beatrice is and internalizing why someone would do these things and why someone would have to play these games to try and drop the hints that he can pick up on. There's a more inner narration from Beatrice where she's talking again about how she can't earn his compassion anymore once he's been tricked. She starts to ask, is the endless magic just basically this repeating cycle, and says she's had enough of being endlessly toyed with witches. And this feels like a kind of key point in which things are turning, where it's not even per se suggesting that now you see the real villains of the two witches who are in control, but it is developing the layers on which you see these things moving, Beatrice often, again, fronts as being powerful and in control and on top of everything to Battler, because that's how they interact. That's their mode of communication, and that's the kind of persona she adopts for him. But the truth is that she's trapped. She was trapped before when she had a pile of gold, but not the means to actualize the way she wanted, and she's trapped now when she has a pile of magic and a torture game, but does not necessarily have the tools to communicate what she wants to a person. To contradict myself slightly from earlier, the final beats where Beatrice is telling Battler to end it, and he looks at her, he can see the sincerity in her in that moment. There is a way in which that specific interaction would help to underline that there is a person there, and that would make him go like, wait, what? Especially when he knows he was letting her win the first time around, and he can then maybe come to the understanding of like, oh, she wasn't doing that to mess with me, maybe. She was genuinely just like, I want this to die. I want this to end now. And to briefly touch on the question mark Tea Party, Lambda Delta's pretty callous and frivolous use of the red truth is a indication of where the rest of the is an indication of where the next episode at least is going to go, because of the ways in which she's like, oh yeah, that's not a trap, it was literally a gun, someone fired a gun. Even Bryn Costello's like, you shouldn't say that, something like that in red. The kid's trying to claim it was magic that bounced Nancy's bullet and killed her. And Lambda Delta was like, oh, whoops, oh well. And I do love that yet again they continue to mock the like, what the heck is stupid trap X and this tiny bombs theory. Ha 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 ha. And then, like, literally right before, Beatrice presents a mystery of how she could have killed Battler that is just that there's a huge bomb, that there's actually a giant bomb. An incredible, like, taunt to make people not believe that. But with that, we come to an end, and this is the halfway point of the game. One kind of... I kind of want to ruminate in some broader thoughts, because one thing I've often thought about after the fact of having finished Umineko as a whole is that I enjoy the way the episodes change, and like they go through different modes, they tonally shift in ways that I think is a good way to keep it fresh, that I actually found the second half of Higurashi dragging more. I had forgotten though how the question arcs, those 4 episodes, align pretty well. The amount of magic escalates over time, as does the presence of Beatrice and other magical characters, but especially with episode 4, it actually makes a pretty clear indication that if you strip out that stuff, there's still just a murder mystery happening underneath that layer, and it's just a matter of you can theoretically peel away that layer and just think about the concrete events happening underneath it. And these 4 fitting together kind of works for me as a underlining of Beatrice's game as intended, and then we're about to get some offshoots that respect Beatrice's game to varying extents, let's say, and really just take the board and use it in different ways, which is both narratively a lot more interesting to me than if we had, say, 2 or 3 more murder mysteries that just have some magic stuff also happening. But it also really underlines the ways in which this ends Beatrice's primary story. We will still get pathos for Beatrice, and we will get some relief, and we'll even get some... in a way, we will still get a different kind of arc for Beatrice as we get Chick Beatrice, who hatches and has to develop her personhood over, and we will get alternate views of Beatrice as we kind of expand what the person of Beatrice is, could be, the different modes, and obviously episode 7. And I referred to the question arcs as the origins of Beatrice. despite the fact that episode 7 is literally the backstory. But I do feel like these 4 episodes put together really give you a good arc of someone who is apparently the villain, but has a tragic backstory. When I say it like that, it sounds like the thing of giving a villain a tragic backstory just so you sort of feel like there's complexity there. But in this case, I mean way more in the sense of a person who is complex presenting as if they're a villain, when in reality she's moving some pieces around a board and playing with them. What you think literally exactly happened on this island is complicated, and we'll talk in episode 7 about that. But I'm in the... I don't know if Beatrice did anything especially wrong, because my read is pretty aligned with the idea that the episode 7 tea party, the Beatrice who is sad and does not enact the plan, is probably quite close to what Beatrice was like. The endless witch Beatrice is a woman given power and told, okay, now use it. You can loop, you can play this game board, you can try again and again, and look for the result you want. I think in terms of real life human Beatrice, she doesn't enact the plan because she doesn't believe it will work. The Beatrice we see in episode 4 who turns sad when Battler fails the test, that's the Beatrice of the real world who fundamentally can't believe that someone will understand and recognize her. The events that lead to the Rockanjima incident, I think in a sense are probably going to be precipitated by Beatrice, but blame is a very different and much more complex question, and I will always trace things back to the source of fuck Kinzo. But I don't want to try to pre-analyze too much of episode 7 stuff. The thing that is important is that I think the Endless Witch as a figure has her kind of mythic origins set out here. Again, it is surprising how clearly laid out episode 2 is, while using magic, as I said, to weave a single thread through line and elide details to avoid discussing some messy and difficult and complex realities of what was happening, to simply say to Battler, Kinzo is an abusive man, an abusive husband/father figure, because even her magical story does make it clear that that is the dynamic, and Battler just doesn't see it. And I think tying this back to the thing I was saying about Rosa, her child abuse, the golden truth element of society at large just accepts that she is allowed to do that. I think there's almost a similar kind of shared delusion of people not wanting to discuss such a difficult, complex, taboo thing, that people don't want to believe it to be true. So it's almost a golden truth of, well, that can't happen. That wouldn't happen in our family. We would have to be shattered and confronted with an undeniable truth for that to happen. Again, talking a lot about the logistics of Beatrice ever trying to assert her position as the head of the Ashurmia family, there's very little odds of her actually being able to successfully face the Ashurmia parents and get them to accept her as the head. They accept her in the different murder games because she presents gold and says, I can give you money, listen to me. But in terms of long term, her trying to take any position of authority is not realistic. Especially, why would she even want to? So in a similar vein, how would you begin to convince these people of Kinzo's abuses, despite the fact that they know he is abusive and will say it and will brush it off like it's not a big deal? Again, we've got a lot of Kinzo stuff coming in episode 7. And then weirder Kinzo stuff in episode 8. I had some thoughts on that at the time. We'll get there. But I think we should cut it there, because again, I think at this point I will just keep talking about future things I've not gotten to in my replay yet. So, thank you all for watching. It has been a lot of fun seeing people comment and enjoy the stuff this far. We're give or take halfway now as we go through, and I hope you're ready for the rest of the ride. I cannot tell if I will have less to say as we go on, because there's ostensibly less spoiler future ahead things to have to guard against, or if I'm actually going to have a lot to say because it's going to get more thematically broad and easy to miss the parallels of stuff. For instance, the love game of episode 6 did not make a lot of sense to me at the time, and having not even gotten to it yet, I'm like, oh, I see what was happening there. So we'll have some stuff to dig into either way. Thank you all for watching anyway. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you continue to enjoy as I pick through the rest of Umineko. See you next time.